All right, cool. We're going to kick this thing off then. Welcome to this installation of the Horizon Room open mic sessions by the Learning Council. Every one of these sessions, we're tackling some of the hardest issues, things that are going on in the industry of education, and things that are immediately on the horizon for all of you in the business. It's a tough time out there. We have a lot of challenges, a lot of opportunities. And you know, this is a great time to get together and put a bunch of brains together, come up with some solutions, share things that are working, things that are still challenges. And so what we're focusing on today is something that came from a colleague of mine, Andrew Kim. He was formerly the superintendent of Comal. He may be joining us today. This particular topic was inspired by something that he said. We were having a conversation about some things that were going on in Texas, and he had an interesting perspective on how we begin to think about solving for some of the challenges that we have. So we're going to dig into that. The Horizon Room, for anybody who hasn't been here, is really a space for educators. It's a place for us to come together and share challenges, solutions, innovations, and really begin the open dialogue about how do we get to the end, and how do we get there in a sane and positive fashion. So we have some friends and colleagues on the call today. There's a few folks that will be joining us in a little bit later. I see that Derek Brown is on the call, a longtime colleague of mine, and an innovator for sure, and someone who's been thinking inside and outside of the box for many years. We're gonna turn things over to the folks that are tuning in, because we definitely want to hear from everyone who's attending. So today's a frame today. What we're thinking about is it outside of the box versus inside the box thinking, right? And so every time we hear, gosh, we have to innovate, we have to change, we have to keep moving forward, we're looking for outside of the box thinking, except that what that means is not what I think people think it means. And so what we at the Learning Council would prefer to point people to is inside the box thinking, right? So inside the box thinking refers to innovation occurring when you know the box contents. We all have a box, right? We all have a box that has all the opportunities, all the challenges, all the mandates, all the things that surround our work. And so when you have that box, you're defined by the dimensions of that box. And innovation really involves taking advantage of what's there versus bringing in something completely different that you don't already have. And so we're going to dig into that, right? We're going to dig into thinking differently about the box. It's really important that we know the box and everything that you have in it, because if you don't, then it's going to be really hard to start to repurpose some of those things and start to get to some innovation within that. So we're going to kick this off by just describing the box, right? And let's just be honest about it. Let's just be straight up front. There are things in the box that we control, and there's things in the box that we may feel like we don't control, but there are all these things that you see on the screen, right? There's funding, there's state federal mandates, there's unfunded mandates, right? There's all kinds of stuff that we hear from our colleagues and that we've experienced as educators and system builders that are inside the box, and we have to know that. I'm gonna pause there because I want to hear from other folks that are on the call. LeiLani Cauthen, our CEO, is a thought partner of mine, and she's also on the call. Derek Brown, you're also on the call. I would love for you guys to unmute yourselves and do a quick intro and share your thinking about what's in the box right now for educators. What do you think?
Well, I'm in the middle of a series of editorials that's coming out of Learning Council that are having to do with saying that the problem with school problems is that they don't know what the actual problem is. And so they're treating symptoms of a much greater problem. So when I look at what's inside the box thinking versus outside the box thinking, I think of that, like, you think you know, but you don't actually know because you're thinking in isolated little bits and pieces rather than looking at the whole scene. And that might be in your box, but it also might be outside the box, like what's going on in the world.
Right. Definitely. Yeah, that contextual piece is really, really very critical for sure. We've got some other folks. If you would just unmute yourselves and share a little bit about what you think about when you have to describe the box and what's in it. What is in our box? What's in the box for you folks?
Good afternoon. Derek Brown here. I'm with Portland Public Schools, and I'm the Senior Director of Technology Operations. Hi, Chris. Hey, LeiLani. Good to see you.
Hey, Derek. Good to see you.
Hi.
It's interesting times. You know, we're like to think we're post-COVID, and we want to move things forward that stuck or that we want to stick with digital curriculum, with the transformation. Sure, there's always hurdles with funding and things of that nature, but if we're doing what's best for our students, we will work through how to get our educators there. And we will do that side by side, as Chris and I did many years ago. We have to get into the classroom. We don't do the PD, sit and get, and it's grassroots, slowly but surely, either by grade level or by curriculum. We get in there and do the work. It's time to continue rolling up our sleeves, and it's taking action, small steps, and then we can adjust and be flexible from there. But
sure,
it's better to move than to have paralysis by analysis. And that has served us well. And even in Portland Public Schools, where it is typically challenging because we have 80, plus schools, and we operate like several little districts instead of one big district. But thankfully, due to our superintendent, who's in his 5th year, our deputy, Dr. Proctor, and we have a new chief academic officer, a new chief of schools. So we now have a full team in place, so cabinet can begin to have these conversations, and we are all on the same page of what we need to do in terms of equity and what's best for kids.
Sure. So you're talking about some things that are in your box that are staffing and team related as well.
Very much so. Very much so.
Yeah, that's a thing that's in the box for a lot of folks. I was just reading an article from the Washington Post, and it was talking about easing or changing the certification measures for teachers, and that there is some discussion about the staffing shortage being so critical that we're willing to put people who may be untrained as educators into the classroom. And that's interesting to me. That's fascinating, but that's a thing that's in our box. Those staffing issues, they're in the box. And what are we going to do with those? And is that one way that people have said, okay, yeah, the staffing issue is in the box. Here's a different way of thinking about it. And that different way is alternative certification. Is that sort of where we're headed?
We certainly need to be having the conversation. It's better to have someone that might be qualified to be in that position through years of experience rather than a degree, and work toward it. So it's they step into the role knowing that they're going to get their credentials and certifications. But I would rather have that person that is interested and wants to do the good work than to have a vacancy and a substitute.
Right. Yeah. I see we've got a superintendent from Wisconsin, Mercer, Wisconsin, also a thought partner. Any thoughts that you've got? I know that you just stepped into a new role and a new community. What's in the box for you?
I think we're dealing with some of the same things, and it's nice to see you, Derek. I think we're dealing with some of the same things we see in the larger school districts. We are a very small school district, but still looking at some of the challenges with staffing and also just traditional school structures, and how do we find our focus and make sure that we're moving forward and kind of doing the right work.
Yeah, that traditional school structure is tough, because that's one of those things that we're seeing a need to move past, and we're seeing folks that are sort of pushing up against that, and they're saying, well, wait a minute, we can't change our traditional structures, and yet, everything that we see in all of our research points to you have to change that traditional school structure. You don't have a choice. It's not optional anymore. We have to get to personalized and flexible. It just isn't optional. So that's one of those things that becomes really sticky for folks.
But I think what happens when you do that, when you bring up structure to people, that they don't know what you're talking about. necessarily. And their mind goes to this. Are you talking about everything being online? Because that didn't work, right? So they, in their mind, there's only two values. There's everybody's in the building all the time, moving along the assembly line, or there's those online kids over there that they don't come into the building and there's no real teacher oversight. They just do courses, right? And that's not really what we're saying when we talk about structural shift. We're talking about something that's in between. And that's really where the market's headed. Otherwise, we wouldn't see this unbelievable numbers of millions of people homeschooling. And there's a lot of states you don't even have to report to the state that you're homeschooling. So those are just the off-grid kids. Nobody has a count in those states where there's no reporting required. So the data that I've been looking at lately is the fact that there's potentially millions more kids in homeschooling than anybody knows. And I think one of the things that's driving that is during the pandemic, people were Googling around and they were finding full curriculum from commercial sources that is not a school. In other words, it's unschooling. And so they're homeschooling, but they're not reporting to anybody they're homeschooling. And I don't think of it as homeschooling. I think of it as sort of commercially led learning, right? They've got like a handful of apps and then some website that has all these courses, and maybe chatbot teachers are offered too. And these are things schools have never heard of. A lot of the stuff that's out there. I mean, there's just a huge number of things. If you spend any time at all on the homeschooling websites, you find companies servicing them that you've never heard of. So it's a very interesting time. And I think it's fractured so much that nobody has a handle on it. I know for a fact that the feds are not tracking the in-betweenness, the ones that are in between. They track homeschooling, they track private schools, they track charters, and they track traditional. But they don't track anything that's sort of in between. And that's my big concern, is that we don't really know what's really happening right now outside the box. So what we're doing inside the box may seem like we're making changes, but it's not true change against the actual friction of the outside environment.
Right. And I think some of that friction, I mean, we list mandates and federal and state mandates because those are real. I remember back to one of our events in Texas where we had that conversation in the group, and we said, and a bunch of the superintendents, and in fact, in more than Texas, we heard that all over the place in the spring, and people were saying, oh, but we've got these seat time requirements, and we've got these other requirements from the state and other requirements from the Fed, and things that oh my gosh, we can't control, and yet maybe you can think about them differently. Maybe there's a different way of thinking about what you conceive as the time that is required to be on task, or how do you think differently about seat time versus something else? Maybe there's a different solution. Maybe there's new ways of thinking about that that we haven't really explored. So I think that those are areas where you're going to have to be brave. And if you're a school leader today, now is the time to dare greatly, right? We've heard those words before in some learned texts, and if there's ever a time to dare greatly, this is for sure that time. We've got some funding, we've got some flexibility, and now it's time to rebuild. It's time to rebuild that new form, not reform. Build the new form. So,
well, I think one of the Janice point, and Andrew, who was sort of our inspiration for this topic, right? One of the things he talked about was definitions of terms. So his inside the box thinking was, if it's not really clear what is exactly meant by seat time, there's maybe some definition that you can do to say, this is what we mean by seat time. What did you mean by seat time? Because you can report seat time if the kid's in the seat, and you can see it in the software, like whether they're in the building or not. So there's some fudgy room around, because the technology that exists today didn't exist when they made those laws, unless it's very specific in your particular state's law that it's actually in building. So he said some really interesting things that day when we were in San Antonio, and and quite a few different definitions of terms that he sort of said, I don't know why we have to say that this is the the way when we could say, this is the definition of what we mean. And then he talked a lot about leading his teams and across the district to understand that if you think it meant this, it really means this, which was a really interesting leadership thing to do, right? So there's also that where you can, maybe redefine what you say you mean when you say teacher, the word teacher, which right now the Learning Council research is finding very interesting comments from teachers all over the country in our national survey about what they think the job actually is. It's all over the place. So there's that too.
Yeah, totally. How does that resonate with you guys?
Well, I was just thinking, okay. I was just thinking when we're looking at students and their engagements, whether they're in a seat doing work online or at a collaborative group online, or whether they're actually in the schoolhouse. I think what matters is, what are the students engaged in? Are there worthy tasks? Too often, I think we've departmentalized things and we've broken it up in these chunks that are maybe seem to be easy to manage on paper, but we really sometimes take the richness of the task out of it. We kind of, I guess, distill things down into, nope, we're focusing on math right now. Nope, we're focusing on language arts. We're doing science. When you go out into the workforce and the real world, what you see is that these things aren't as departmentalized as we've made them in school. So just thinking about, are we making sure that students have opportunities to engage in authentic tasks, and what does that look like? And how do we move past those structures where everything is a content area in 50-minute blocks of time, which is really not how things function outside of the schoolhouse. So just really processing through, what does that look like for students to be engaged during this period of time when we have so much access through technology and through other resources. We just have a lot of access to information and to resources. And so how are we using those to really make sure that students are engaging in worthy tasks?
I agree 100%. And my spin is a tad bit different. And that, LeiLani, I was thinking about what you said, what the superintendent in San Antonio said is thinking about it differently. So we have to understand our customer. And our customers were loud and clear by our reduction in numbers and in seats in classrooms that they have options. And if we don't adjust and become more flexible and listen to the needs of those that we serve, we're going to become irrelevant. The schoolhouse will always be there, but it's going to continue to shrink because there's choice. So we have to figure out terms, as you mentioned. What are we doing? Why are we doing it? Who's it for? And then make sure that's in alignment with state and federal laws, with what is true to the mission and vision of the school district, to ensure that students are engaged, to have the tools that they need. Teachers are trained, more importantly, because that's going to take some time. It's a tremendous shift. LeiLani, you mentioned it, that sometimes our teachers are, or not sometimes, often right now, our teachers are, what am I doing? Especially if their school or the district is short-staffed or understaffed, which many are. Principals are in the classroom, teachers are bouncing around, just trying. My wife's a school counselor, she's in the classroom oftentimes, and so you're not able to focus on your role, whatever it might be, because you're just trying to fill the void. And so we're going to have to figure this out relatively quickly if we want to stay relevant. We're seeing colleges and universities close. That brick and mortar is shrinking, just like our classrooms. And our teacher pool is also shrinking and has been for many years. This is nothing new. We're just now seeing it. We've seen the data, but now we're seeing it in the schoolhouse. So don't know what the answer is. But together, I think through conversations like this, we have to start engaging in conversations in our communities and figuring out where can we move forward? How do we move forward?
I like the purposefulness of what each of you guys just said, because you pointed out two levels of in the box thinking. Derek, yours was, what do people want, right? Like, and right now they want quality digital flexibility, they want that. Everywhere they want that. We're getting calls at Learning Counsel from schools that are complaining of the fact that they feel like they're 100 years old in their operations because they just don't know what they're doing. They don't even know the options in digital. They're way behind, right? And then Renee, you talked about something that I think we heard the first time in Phoenix, Chris, where another superintendent brought up the fact that where is subject treatment going, right? Because we've had silos of math, language, science, social studies, but really those things are not in isolation in real life, what you said, Renee. And there's a few places right now that are actually trying to create cross-curricular type of treatment of pathways for students to learn. But I haven't seen anyone sort of create a giant matrix-like grid that would go, here's a project, and it goes ping, 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 ping across all these subjects, right? Like check, 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 check. Okay, here's another project, check, 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 check. And do it by, sort of cognition level as you go through the grades, so that you had a journey of experience rather than sort of drudgery. I got to do math now. So, but that's what people are expecting. So the two of you talked about in the box thinking in terms of an expectation that is out there that we're not built for. But it is the expectation. I mean, wouldn't all of us, if we were in school, even today, if we could go to school and every week was a new fantastic project that pinged on all the subjects, and we got to work together with people, there would be a reason to be there, number one, right? There'd be a reason to get all of our homework and all our online stuff when we were sitting in our homeroom or we were at home. It would be a reason to get it done because now there's an action moment where we have to apply, right? We all talk about project-based learning is so critical, right? But we don't do it all the time.
Right.
Yeah.
Or we don't understand it, right? We haven't really done learning that allows us to implement something like that. Because there are people that do it fairly successfully, right? We've seen some approximations of that, and they're all fairly analog. I mean, I'm firmly a teaching and learning guy, but I also know that technology is my friend, and I do know I've seen it, right? I've seen people do this disaggregation thing, and really work hard at splitting up the old system and the old structure, so that we aren't piecemealing things. And it's a ton of work. And I, today I look at us now and I say, wow, we've got technology that can actually take some stuff off of my back as a teacher. That buys time for me. I'm about it. I'm there. I'm so there. And yet we haven't done that's right. It might be common knowledge, but it's not common practice. How do we get there? How do we get to that spot in the middle? We've tried all the other things, and yet the frustration is now we're still admiring the problem. I don't understand.
Can I just say that I think that the in the box thinking based on what you just said and Derek said or Renee said is that curriculum planning, the lesson plans themselves have to be centralized, because that's the only way you're going to get to true experiential journeys that ping cross subject easily. And places like Summit Public do this, where they hire teachers and the teachers are like, oh, I didn't know, when they hired me, they told me that, the curriculum's already planned. Here's your curriculum. I read a story of one woman who said, I was really nervous about that because as a teacher, I like my own power to shift thinking. Well, she still could, but she found out she could still do that. They're still tweaking around the edges. And that is no different than the days of textbooks.
Right.
But something happened in the last 8-10 years where it's like, we're all going digital, and it just went splat. Everyone's on their own, and we lost ground in terms of being able to do anything that was cross-curricular or run control on anything from the top. And we're now in an age where the logistics of the individual student path really should be, like you were just saying, Chris, that's artful cross-curriculum thing that's project-based, blah, blah, blah. It should be, but no one teacher is going to do that.
Right.
So it's a problem of management. It's inside the box. How do I create this? Love to hear you guys' thoughts on that.
I think, LeiLani, you touched on something really interesting. It's really about change. No one likes change, and we just move the cheese. It's digital. I was talking to a school district about an hour ago, and they said they have about 15 math adoptions, and this year they're going to focus on with procurement and a steering committee made up of teaching and learning and teachers to shrink that, because what's relevant, what's important, what should be moved forward, so that's kind of where we are with this digital curriculum. It's the same as a textbook. Here's your tool, here are your resources, and then there's no ceiling. It's just, Chris, you said this many times. This is the baseline. This is the minimum that we're going to do, but there is no ceiling, and that's what we're looking for. And I think that's where some of us are getting stuck is, and then observations too. So getting into the classroom, and it's hard, because there's so many things going on and have been for the last 2-3 years, but coming up with a rubric that's achievable, smart, pick your adjective and your rubric to go in and have those observations and have those relevant conversations with staff and it's a 2 to 3 year program. We don't expect you to get here overnight, but this is where we expect you to be in 2 or 3 years. And it's not only for the growth of the teacher, but we're doing this for the students. I mean, that's the whole reason we're in the game, right? Or should be in the business. And I think that's a tough pill to swallow for this 150 plus year tradition. That's kind of where we are. We're disrupting, or should be disrupting, school, K-12, and it's hard.
Sure. Yep. Any thoughts on that, Renee?
Yeah, I completely agree. I think it is challenging when we're looking at these structures that are built in. A lot of times teachers are teaching the way they were taught, and that's their reference. Our teachers have been 16 plus years in school seeing this model. And so they've been socialized, they've been brought up in this model. And so then changing that and having them picture something that looks different than what's been before them is a challenge. And so how do you paint that picture, and how do you visualize something that maybe they haven't seen before? And so that is a challenge. And to be able to have adults look and see something that could look different and have that vision for that. And let's face it, there are not a lot of models out there. And so a lot of the models we see are still look more like the traditional schooling that I had when I was in school. And so realizing that things have changed quite a bit, and what our students need have changed, and how do we meet the needs of those students? And we can see from our communities, and Derek, you mentioned this with student enrollment dropping, that what families are seeking is changing. And so making sure that we're relevant, that we're meeting those needs, and that we're changing too is vital.
Yeah, I think that's critical. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I think it comes down to one really clear fact in my mind. The one-to-many model is done. It's over. And we have a desire to not give up the human interaction. How do you do that? So if one-to-many is over, how do you still have human interaction? And small group, if not large group for some kids, like sometimes, not just field trips, but academic. How do you do that? How do you find purpose in togetherness? So I'm going to flip the script a little bit, right? Instead of always together, academically plan and purposeful togetherness only. So that's the real flip script, right? We don't have that. We have, I am the leader of 30 kids, and I'm going to do things the way I'm going to do them. And I should be more professional, and I should cohort the right kids together and on everything. And I should manage everything. And I should fill out all the forms I got to fill out every day. And I got to get my lesson plan done for tomorrow. And it's overwhelmed city. Can't compete with the distribution of knowledge of the open internet. No way, no how. Never. Right. And while if a kid gets bored even for 10 seconds today, they're picking up their phone. They're not like other generations. Right. If they're not tuned in, if something the teacher did tune them out, they're gone. And they're expecting 100% personalization for them. That doesn't exist. We haven't built that system. And so if I think of in the box thinking, it comes down to, let's start with like, walk away from always whole group. Just walk away. That's really what I think in the box thinking needs to be, is like, I need to do, how do I build something that is 100% one-to-one? How do I do that? I know that sounds like, what? It's doable. That's the attention that I've had for the last 4 years, is logistics can do this. Proper logistics can get a FedEx package anywhere in the world within 24 hours. That's logistics, baby, right? So I'm just thinking there's got to be a way, but I'll stop for now.
No, I think that's true. I think that's right on. And we're getting into the last few moments of our time together, but thinking about that change, yeah, we all know as educators, we know that the one-to-one is highly effective. And we know that the human interaction, when we put minds together and we get like minds thinking and talking and writing and doing all the things that cement learning, we know that that's effective. And yet we still fall back into that weird whole groupness. And, I've seen it as a principal. I saw it where people were constantly straying into that lane of stand and deliver. And it's sort of, I guess it goes back to what you were saying, Renee. It's how we've learned. And so if that's the case, and we teach how we were taught, then we're not really preparing ourselves for much of a future, because our teaching still looks like teaching back then. And so all of these teachers who are coming forward, and all of these kids who are moving forward, we're expecting them to join the ranks of teachers, except that what they see and what they experienced was really boring and it was not good. And so why would they ever want to go do that? That's right, they don't. And so if we then keep saying, we're going to just keep teaching the way we teach and the way we've been taught, then for generations hence, we're just going to keep doing that. And unless we break that cycle and start teaching differently and start learning differently, then we're never really going to change. And then where are we, right? Then we're dinosaurs.
I like the way you said that, because I immediately got a picture in my mind of, like, the times I was in Los Angeles around Hollywood early in my career, hanging around down there, and I would see the people lined up for interviews, play a part in some movie or something. People will leave their entire life behind to go and be a waitress in Los Angeles to try to get in to that industry. There's a lot of industries like that, right? Like, people are just dying to get in. We do not have that in teaching. And yet you're in, like, 43 weeks of 7-hour days, 12 years of your life, and you're not dying to get in? What is happening? Like, so,
right. What have we done?
We're graduating about 70,000 teacher wannabes a year across all of America. We need 1 million. That's right. How bad that is.
Yikes. And yet if we can't change, we're never going to fix that. It's not money. Money's not the fix. It isn't that. It just isn't. Renee, you unmiked. What do you think?
Oh, I was just thinking, piggybacking on what you said, Chris, just about how students are in the classrooms and do they want to enter this field, and it seemed boring to them. Just thinking about teacher satisfaction and teachers leaving the field. It's kind of the same thing. Once you get into this profession, if you are standing there 7 hours a day delivering dry instruction, and it's not very exciting for you either, why wouldn't we lose people? So I think there's definitely a better way to do this that's better for students and better for teachers, that makes them feel like there is value in what they're doing, that it's not dry and boring. And I think that kind of hits both things, like students leaving and also teachers leaving as well.
Yeah. And I guess you have to take risks, right? Because if you don't take the risk, then you're not going to move forward, right? Because we know that the evolution occurs when you engage in that risk-taking behavior. positively, and begin to move forward in your practice. I think that's a critical aspect of that. Derek, any thoughts on where we're headed right now?
I just think I have three children, 2 in middle school and 1 in elementary, and they always talk about how bored they are. They thrived when they were at home, and now they go to school for socialization. And here we are, week 3 of school, and they're bored. For whatever reason, the district that they are in, I was going to say textbooks. Chromebooks don't go home anymore. And I think that was just due to retention. The district was afraid of what was happening and loss of theft, et cetera. So they're keeping them in the classroom. So the good news is they still have access. And then, we're super fortunate that the kids have the technology in our home, but not all kids do. So now we're back to the disparity and inequity. Students are only getting it when they're in the schoolhouse, and families want choice. And so some days my kids, they want a mental health day. And I'm like, yep, no problem. You're making amazing grades. You're thriving. You want a mental health day? You can have it. Whereas I would never have done that before COVID. So even I am adjusting. And I'm not looking for alternatives. I think they need to be in public school. But what I am hoping for is that one teacher that's going to engage them for several hours a day, and then to make them want to come to school rather than their friends. And that's what, and Renee, you said that, we have so many amazing teachers that want to do the best that they possibly can, not only because that's who they are, but they want to do that because of the kids that they are serving. And we need to create room and space for them to be able to do that. And it's hard to do that when we're understaffed, under-resourced. So we have to get a handle on what's going on, give our teachers the support that they need. But how do you do that when you're understaffed? You're going to have to maximize classrooms or wait for enough students or parents to have alternative options to where the classroom shrinks, and then we're right-sized. Hope that doesn't happen, but we're headed that direction.
So I think that's fascinating because those are all yes ands for me. And so yes, yep, we're understaffed. Yep, we're facing a funding crisis because of FTE. Kids are leaving. Yes, those things. And yep, systems are overloaded. Yes, they are. Yep, sure. Teachers are burned out. They're leaving the profession. New ones aren't coming in. All those things are yes. Those are yes ands. And so now what do we do? So what is it that the structure has to do? What are the leadership, the folks in the leadership seats, what do they have to do in order to now work with what's in the box? What are you going to do with all those things that are yeses, right? We don't get to wait around. We don't get to hold on and hope that more teachers show up. We don't get that. We don't get to do that. We don't get to hope that enough people that we're going to right size our way into change. We don't get to do that.
Can I just say something that when I think about this, I'm going to go back to what sort of my movie idea. Like people line up to be in the movies. There's also another reference point, right? So if you're a newscaster, you're handed a script. You don't write all that stuff. The writers do that. And then you're on deck and you're like amazing because pretty much you're reading from a teleprompter. But you're amazing because it's all been pre-done for you. And the purpose of the pre-doneness is very exact. It's to deliver a quality, intense experience. And we're expecting every teacher, 3.3 million in America, to do that every time. It's not possible. It's not part of the human condition. So I really believe that what we have to think with is we have to lead from the top. We have to actually create coordinated, well-executed scripted curriculum. Teachers can tweak around that. They can do what they did back in the textbook days, add a video, have a project, whatever they want to do. But the experience of school is the leadership issue. It's not down in the classroom issue because we've thought for way too long inside the box of I execute through the humans. No, you don't. Not anymore. You execute through digital, distribution of knowledge with the teachers as a premium around that. The teachers are a premium, and how you use your humans has to be perfected. It's not like, let's get them to be better teachers only. No. Let's have a well-executed, unbelievably crafted digital curriculum map that you can maneuver around in and veer off into the next grade because you're such a smart kid. But in the meantime, you're still intersecting at points that are perfected human intersections. So you get the socialization, but you're never bored. I mean, that's the trick. So it looks like somebody else just joined us. Chris, you want to have him introduce himself?
Yeah. So who? It looks like J.W. Marshall, new on the call.
Yeah, I'm here. Sorry, I've been on the whole time. I'm just in the car for pickup of my kids.
Oh,
But,
nice.
great-
That's
great to
authentic.
listen in. Yeah,
Great. So what do you do?
I'm in ed tech.
Okay.
And I host a couple of podcasts on thought leadership for ed tech. So I was curious to learn more. And I work with Robin Schulman a lot. I think she's written some articles that Learning Counsel has been publishing recently. So I'm just in the mix of this thought leadership, and so much of what you guys are saying is spot on. So I'm just enjoying hearing like-minded folks that are really talking about the innovation that isn't in the future anymore. It is happening now, and it needs to be happening now. I keep telling everyone that this was the most painful 3 years as educators, but the hard work really does start now in building the better system, right? We're moving out of survival mode and into how do we take the good and how do we, move forward in a way that this isn't a lost generation of students with learning loss, but this is students that will benefit in years to come because of the way we're accelerating learning, we're personalizing learning, we're building a better system that's going to better serve them in the long run, and we're all going to be better off for it. But that doesn't just magically happen, right? It takes a lot of hard work to keep the momentum and to really push on the accelerator now. And it's probably things we should have been doing before, but we're teed up, and I just can't. I'll take every opportunity I can to say it, to shout it, to podcast it, speaking at conferences, whatever I can do to just keep pushing. So thank you all for the work you're doing and the thought leadership you're putting out there. It's so important. So, and I'm happy to be a resource anytime I can for y'all as well.
Awesome. Thanks for
any
joining
friend of
us.
Robin's is a friend of mine. Love
Hey,
Robin.
yeah, she's
Yeah,
on my team. I can't believe she's on my team. It's just amazing. She's such a great woman.
Yeah, and I
great
just
writer.
mentioned Summit. I read an article about one of Summit teachers not too long ago, and I was just mentioning it. So it's weird that you got on. Thank you for that.
Yeah, cool. Derek, you had unmuted. Did you have a thought there?
Well, I was just going to say, you're ahead of your time, Chris. This is the work that you were doing 5+ years ago with the digital roadmap. It's kind of, we're going on a trip. We're going to Disneyland. And what does that look like? And we're going to take multiple pathways. We might catch a plane. We might drive a car. We might ride a bus. We might take BART or the metro. We're going to take all of those avenues, but the end goal or the outcome is we're going to get to Disneyland. But we're going to draw it out, and each of those pathways through curriculum. And so let's pick 8th grade math. Okay, here's what 8th grade math looks like using these resources in our LMS. And the teacher can go in and see these multiple resources for them to choose and tweak. And we'll do the same thing for each subject and each grade level. That was your vision. And we started that we need to go back to that, but that changes teaching and learning, or the chief academic officer. They have to have that mindset, or that want, if you will, because that's a huge lift if you don't have the curriculum or the digital curriculum. Hopefully school districts have the digital curriculum now, coming off the heels of COVID. But if not, now's the time to craft that and the framework. So it's creating those pillars and frameworks for teachers to be successful. And LeiLani, I love what you said. I mean, it's creating a script. When that newscaster, broadcaster gets up there, they have the personality and the charisma, but it's all written for them. They can deliver, but it's written for them. And that's what our teachers need. Is they need to hit that easy button of the curriculum, because they know what to do with it. That's their craft. But we need to shrink it and not have, it's too ambiguous right now. There's too much. and we need
Yeah,
to.
and we're expecting teachers all over the country to do a lesson plan and fill out 17 boxes of what they did and which standard they hit every single day in a lot of districts. And I'm like, really? This is the newscaster person, They should be just like, they're on deck. They shouldn't have to do paperwork. What are you doing? Like, why are you doing that? That's your talent. In the industry, in the movie industry, they're called the talent, right? They're the talent. Why are you making them do like all this stuff, right? So it's funny.
I think that's great. I think we should start referring to them as the talent. I think that's an interesting distinction. I like the idea of providing the script as well. And I think we were there at one point, and somehow we went astray because we provided a script and we said, now this is supposed to be the floor. This is the baseline of the content and stuff that you have. These are the tools and the Lego blocks. Now go create interesting experiences and worthy tasks for the kids. And then somehow along the way, someone said, actually, I think I'm just going to do what it says right here in the book. And what it says, step 2, I'm going to actually read the instructions that it says in the book. I'm going to read that out loud in the classroom. And guess what? I don't have to do anything else. There's nothing more that I need to do. And so I totally agree that the script is good. We do need to help simplify. We do need to help create the pathways and provide the structural support for teachers to go do creative things. But I'm going to lean on those teachers to actually go do that. Guys, go do the thing. And if your job is to make this an interesting experience and engaging and worthy and meaningful using these tools, it's on you to go do that. We gave you the script. If you're a boring newscaster, it isn't because of the script. It's not the script. It was you. Maybe it was your tie. I don't know.
But I think we would really freak out teachers if we were to use the word script right in front of them. But the fact is, when I think about teaching, I don't know what you guys think, but when I think about teaching, the thing I needed the most from a teacher was, I think, my first year in algebra. And I just didn't get something. I just didn't get it. And no one really unraveled that for me until my brother did. Like, he was ahead of me in school and he was like, here's how you do it. But I wasn't getting it. It was the first subject I'd ever encountered. I really wasn't getting it. Well, somebody who knew algebra well should have been, coming over and dragging me into the corner and going, here's what this means, right? Like what don't you get? Like, the unraveling of the mind in terms of what it doesn't get is, to me, the pinnacle of teaching. Like, that's the thing you got to be doing. It's not like standing and delivering only, or finding things, resourcing things from across the global internet, or doing a song and dance. It's, what do you not get? Like, that's the thing that is teaching to me. I don't know what you guys really think of as teaching, but
yeah,
let
what do
me
you
hear
think?
your thoughts.
Unmute, folks. Let's hear it.
Well, that's the shift to mastery based, competency based versus, well, you just passed the algebra class, the test, just enough to move on, but you didn't really learn anything. I was just interviewing Michael Horn, his new book, Reopen to Reinvent. And that was a big piece of his book was, and Sal Khan talks about not being limited by time and space. Why do you have one chance to learn algebra and you learn it or you don't? And our system pushes you through either way for the most part. So I think that goes hand in hand with the bureaucracy and the expectations of making everyone learn everything, but not holding them accountable to learn it and pushing them through the system. There's some brokenness there that does fall on the teachers to try to do triage and fix, and that's not fair to them to have to do that and not give them the resources. So I think that ties in with the script and the differentiated learning, the personalized learning paths. It's easier said than done, but it is possible now. We are seeing people doing it more and more effectively through the pandemic and now coming out of the pandemic. And I think those are the stories we need to tell, that this is no longer a theoretical. We've been talking about personalized learning and ed tech for 20 plus years, but it is actually happening now on mass scale. And that's really, really exciting. And hopefully we can get more away from the standardized testing and more towards the and not treating elementary, middle, and high school the same, right? Knowing that those students and teachers have different needs for their type of scripts. And hopefully as students get older, they get to choose their own adventure a little bit more and build their own Disneyland, right? Let's get the kids in elementary to the same Disneyland. Let's start giving more choice, student choice in middle, and then in high school, let them build their own adventure towards college, towards career, towards, the different destinations that they can get to. So I think that's ties right in with the same conversation, and it's another layer. It's more complex, but it's really important.
Chris,
Yeah.
did you notice
Great point.
Andrew arrived? So we have enough time for Andrew to actually share with us.
Perfect.
Andrew, we were talking about you earlier and saying really positive, nice things.
Hey, Andrew, good to see you.
Yes, good to see everybody, and thanks for the invitation. So appreciate it very much. I mean, this is like an awesome PowerPoint slide, by the way. I love this inside the box and boxed in idea. There's no doubt. So it's a great topic, and thanks to JW over there, a great comment as well too.
So we were sharing some thoughts that you had shared, in fact, and at the top of our conversation had divulged that you were the inspiration for this particular topic, and that's awesome because some of the things that you brought up in the last time we were together in your superintendency were different ways of thinking about what was in the box, and could you share a little bit about that concept that you used in your last system?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so I think there's some assumptions that I'm going to share with you that I hold. So I've been in education now 29 years, all of it in Texas. 15 of those have been superintendent of schools. And, I've been in Dallas ISD, Round Rock ISD, a small little school district in Texas, as well as a mid-sized school district, and so forth and so on. So, if you think about it, all of us move into central office positions and also into superintendency or leadership positions. And we really have to be honest with ourselves in some sense and reflect on the type of training that we receive to get to those levels. The notion that if you were a good teacher doesn't necessarily make you a good administrator or principal, for that matter, right? And but by and large, if you were good at being a good teacher, somehow or another, you got promoted up to being an administrator and so forth and so on. But along that continuum, we don't necessarily get a lot of training or curriculum associated with perhaps project management, Scrum ideas, or in terms of how we might, operate a budget and things of that nature. Yeah, there's some. I'm not trying to, knock anything out here. I'm just saying, generally speaking. And when you think about those notions, you have so many operational things that occurs that has to be unified and operate in extreme unison in order for things to work. I mean, in today's world, we're talking about, for example, operational safety issues related to schools. If you are not involved as a superintendent or as a principal, understanding the operation of how safety works in concert with academic progress still, you're missing the point, right? And how does that work? So always knowing what's inside the box and the process by we understand those things, I think sometimes have to be, we have to be more intentional about that. And for many years, I've always said that I'm not a school reformer, because teachers and principals are working hard. I mean, they're working hard, but I've always considered myself as a central office reformer. How can central office make it easier on principals and teachers to do their jobs and really get out of their way? And so what does that mean? So I think it's really about process management, performance management. Ideas borrow from, the software companies called Scrum. I think these ideas is something that we're going to have to adopt, because after all, running a school district is a multi-million-dollar, business. In many cases, many of our school systems are the largest employer in that area. And so it's a business. So I think we have to really be thoughtful about that. And so that's just my idea of what's inside the box, right, Chris? And just understanding what that is. And one of the things that I really pride myself was scheduling. So every February on Groundhog Day, February the 2nd, I will start by organizing all of our activities of the upcoming school year. And we would actually put out a calendar by June that had every activity, every meeting identified for the following year. So basically counselors, the GT coordinator, bilingual teachers, everybody knew how we were going to meet so that there was no and that came about as a result of my first year here 10 years ago as a school district superintendent. Principals were being pulled out of schools awful lot to the central office. And I was like, no, they need to be at campus. They need to be on campus. So how do we do that? Well, it's no one's fault, but the director of bilingual program, the director of counselor, the director of legal services, they were not coordinated well enough to know that they were pulling principals out literally Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and the athletic coordinator is pulling them on Friday. So it's like, they're being pulled out every day. So now let's go ahead and parlay this. Let's organize ourselves here at central office. Let's understand what's inside the box so that the administrators can actually do their jobs better at that. So as a result of that, we never pulled it after producing this what I call the master plan calendar. We never had principals being pulled out, but once every 2 weeks or so, if that makes sense, in that regard.
That's a great point. And what I like about that story is that highlights sort of the depth of thinking that has to occur as we identify what's in the box. Because if we don't get to that level, we're gonna lose some things, right? There's going to be some loose ends, and we're not really ever going to be cohesive in the thing that we're trying to do and the change that we're attempting. And I think that's critical.
It's also pointing out logistics.
Yes.
Right? This is not the thinking that most leaders have, is they're not logistical thinkers. And this is a critical point you made, Andrew, about you got to get organized, and that's not always organized.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I don't know if you know this or not, but the Marine Corps, one of their 4 commands is what they call logos, logistics. So the Marine Corps cannot function unless they have resource supply chain, right? And so it's the same idea. So Intel is a big one. I mean, so if you're gonna go ahead and if the Marine Corps puts a high value on logistics, we ought to do the same thing as well too, in terms of how we organize our people, time, because we only have a very short amount of time to really make a difference. And so logistics is, in my opinion, is one of the most important things. And nowadays, logistics at Amazon, FedEx, companies delivering, Amazon Prime delivering to your doorsteps overnight. That logistics is impressive, right? And so I think there's now an expectation that teachers and the average person now has about delivery mechanism and coordination. I think it's going to become more and more apparent. And if our industry does not sort of modernize itself about that, then we're going to look like something out of the 1970s, trying to go ahead and do the old-fashioned way of doing things. It's not going to work anymore.
Yeah, agreed. I think we're already there, right? It isn't that we're approaching that time. We're already there. So speaking of time, we are a little bit over, and I want to make sure that I honor everybody's day. I want to thank you all for being part of this conversation in the Horizon Room. Any last thoughts, parting bits of wisdom that you want to impart, reflections on the time that we just had together?
Raised hand. I love to dig into this logistical conversation and the structure of logistics itself. Andrew, I'm going to come back to you on that, because we have a whole special report we're planning for spring of 2023 that's going to be focused on logistics, and I just want to pick your brain. So plan for that.
For
yeah,
sure.
No, actually, I'm now working with the University of Texas at Austin about this very topic, about the logistics of working with about 1,000 Algebra 1 teachers in the state, and how does the logistics work on that. So I'll be more than happy to converse you with that. There's no doubt.
Yeah, love it.
Perfect. Nice. All right. Well, folks, thank you so much for joining us. Sorry, JW, you unmuted. Go ahead.
I was just going to share one final story, and maybe we can follow up on this, Andrew or LeiLani. But if you're familiar with the work of Scott Murray, he's the superintendent at Ector County. And speaking of Disneyland, I used to work at Disneyland, but I'm hosting a show called for the Texas School Alliance, the 45 biggest districts in the state. And the day I interviewed him, he was handing out $850,000 to teachers based on their performance, based on additional leadership roles. The same theory of not having to leave teaching to be an administrator to advance your career or make more money. And I think this is a good example of in-the-box thinking. His team, logistics team, found all of this money in state and federal programs that just aren't very well known. And so rather than keep that to himself, he's trying to talk to every other superintendent or district and say, you know, this money is out there if you know where to look and you know how to fill out the paperwork. And they don't have a teacher shortage problem. They are fully staffed. They did some high dosage tutoring supplements, but really they were able to keep all of their teachers and even attract teachers to move to Odessa Midland, which is the middle of nowhere kind of Texas, because of the way that they're structuring their teacher compensation. And it's just an amazing story. So that's probably another guy to get involved in future conversations. He's just really innovative in what he's doing. So I'll leave you at that. If there's anything else I can do to help this group, let me know after.
Nice. Thanks so much. Well, thank you folks for being here. The Horizon Room's up every 2 weeks. Join us the next time. We're going to start picking apart strategies versus tactics in education. This is very aligned with what we're talking about today. And it's kind of a misconception. What we've discovered is that, you know, there may be some murky understanding around what that is and what the impact of both of those things are. So tune back in the Horizon Room. We're always got the hot topics going, and join us when you can. So thanks everyone for being here. Appreciate the thought leadership. We'll see you next time.